I need you to come inside my house right now." When Natalie Vaughn, the Untouchable tech CEO who lived in the mansion across the street, appeared at Ryan Walker's fence that stormy afternoon with trembling hands and desperate eyes, he knew something had shattered in her carefully controlled world. She hadn't spoken to a neighbor in 2 years, hadn't let a man cross her threshold in just as long, but now she was asking, no, begging. What Ryan would discover inside that silent, beautiful house would change both their lives forever. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The storm hit Seattle's outskirts without warning. Ryan Walker stood at his kitchen window, watching the sky turn from gray to bruised purple in a matter of minutes. Thunder rolled across the neighborhood like a freight train, rattling the windows of his small wooden house. Rain hammered against the roof, drowning out the sound of the television his daughter had left playing in the living room. "Dad?" Emma's voice floated from upstairs, small and worried. "It's okay, sweetheart," Ryan called back, forcing warmth into his voice. "Just a summer storm. You know how loud they get." He heard her footsteps retreat back to her room. At 6 years old, Emma was braver than most kids, but storms still unnerved her. They reminded her of the night her mother died, the night the police officers had come to their door with rain dripping from their uniforms and terrible news on their lips. That had been 4 years ago. Ryan turned away from the window and focused on the present. The storm would pass. It always did. And tomorrow morning, he'd be out in the yard cleaning up whatever debris the wind had scattered across their property. That was his routine. Wake up, make Emma breakfast, drop her at school, work his landscaping jobs, pick her up, make dinner, help with homework, tuck her in. Repeat. Simple. Controlled. Safe. It was the only way he knew how to survive. By 10 o'clock, the worst of the storm had moved on, leaving behind a steady drizzle and the sound of water dripping from the eaves. Ryan checked on Emma one last time. She'd fallen asleep with her nightlight on and her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, then headed to bed himself. He didn't sleep well. He never did. And the next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm nothing but a memory written in puddles and scattered branches. Ryan woke at 6, made coffee, and stepped out into the yard while Emma still slept upstairs. The damage wasn't bad. A few broken branches from the oak tree, some shingles that would need replacing. The fence between his property and the Vaughn place had a loose post that would need attention. Ryan grabbed his work gloves and started hauling branches to the curb. As he worked, he couldn't help but glance across the street. The Vaughn house stood like a monument to modern architecture. All clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and expensive minimalism. It was 3 times the size of Ryan's modest home, with a manicured lawn that a professional service maintained every Thursday morning. And it was almost always silent. Natalie Vaughn lived there alone. Ryan had seen her exactly 7 times in the 2 years since she'd moved in. She left for work before sunrise and returned after dark, her black Tesla pulling into the garage with mechanical precision. She never attended neighborhood gatherings, never put out Halloween decorations or Christmas lights, never so much as waved when Ryan happened to be checking his mail at the same time she was leaving for the office. The other neighbors talked about her sometimes. "Did you know she runs that design firm downtown? The one that just got written up in Forbes? I heard she's worth millions. Why would someone like that live in a neighborhood like this?" Ryan didn't care about any of that. As far as he was concerned, everyone deserved privacy. If Natalie Vaughn wanted to live like a ghost in her expensive house, that was her business. He was dragging the last branch to the curb when he heard the sound of a car door closing. He looked up. Natalie Vaughn stood in her driveway, staring at her house like she'd never seen it before. Ryan froze. She was dressed for work, crisp white blouse, tailored black pants, heels that probably cost more than his truck payment. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and even from across the street, Ryan could see the tension in her shoulders. For a long moment, she just stood there. Then slowly, she turned and looked directly at him. Ryan's instinct was to look away, to respect the invisible boundary that had existed between them for 2 years. But something in her expression stopped him. She wasn't looking at him with the cold dismissiveness he'd expected. She looked afraid. Before he could process what that meant, she started walking toward him. Actually walking. Across the street. Directly toward his property. Ryan straightened, pulling off his work gloves as she approached the fence line. Up close, Natalie Vaughn was even more striking than he'd realized. Sharp cheekbones, intelligent dark eyes, the kind of presence that probably commanded boardrooms without effort. But right now that presence was fractured. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and she kept glancing back at her house like it might disappear if she looked away too long. "Mr. Walker?" Her voice was smooth, professional, with just the slightest tremor underneath. "Ryan," he said automatically. Just Ryan. She nodded, then seemed to struggle with what to say next. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of water dripping from the trees and a distant dog barking. She started, then stopped, took a breath. "I know we haven't really spoken before. I apologize for that. I've been busy." "It's fine," Ryan said, because it was. "Everyone's got their own life." "Right." She looked relieved, then immediately anxious again. "I need to ask you something. It's going to sound strange." Ryan waited. "When did you last see someone go into my house?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that." Her jaw tightened. "When was the last time you saw another person, any person, enter my house?" Ryan thought about it. "I don't really pay attention to—" "Please." The word came out sharp, almost desperate. "I need to know." He studied her for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. "I've never seen anyone go into your house," he said carefully. "Not since you moved in." Something flickered across her face. Relief? Grief? He couldn't tell. "No family?" he asked gently. "No friends?" "No." The word was flat, final. Another silence fell. Ryan could see her struggling with something, could see the war playing out behind her eyes. She was a woman used to being in control, and right now control was slipping through her fingers. "Ms. Vaughn." "Natalie." She said it quickly, like she needed to establish something equal between them. "Please call me Natalie." "Natalie," he amended. "Is everything okay?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, everything is not okay." Then she looked him straight in the eye, and what she said next made his entire world tilt sideways. "I need you to come inside my house." Ryan blinked. "What?" "Not like that," she said quickly, color rising in her cheeks. "I need help. With repairs. Things are breaking, and I don't know how to fix them, and I can't—" She stopped, visibly steadying herself. "I can't let just anyone in. I can't trust just anyone." "But you can trust me?" "You're a father." She said it like it explained everything. "I've watched you with your daughter, the way you are with her, patient, kind, safe." The word safe hung in the air between them. "What kind of repairs?" Ryan asked. "Everything," her voice cracked slightly. "The kitchen sink's been leaking for 3 months. The lights in the hallway flicker. One of the cabinet doors in the bathroom fell off last week. The back porch has a loose board that I'm pretty sure is rotting. I keep making lists of things I need to call someone about, but then She trailed off, looking away. "Then you what?" "Then I remember that would mean letting a stranger into my home." She turned back to him, and the vulnerability in her eyes was staggering. "Do you know how long it's been since a man entered my house?" Ryan shook his head. "Almost 2 years." She said it quietly, like a confession. "Since my father died. Since I moved here to get away from everything. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just kept working, kept moving forward, kept everything controlled and perfect and quiet, I'd be fine." Her laugh was bitter. "But houses don't care about your trauma. They break anyway." Ryan didn't know what to say. This woman, this powerful, successful, unreachable woman, was standing at his fence asking for help with the kind of desperation that spoke of something much deeper than leaking pipes. "I'll get my toolbox," he heard himself say. The relief that washed over Natalie's face was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," she breathed. "I'll pay you, of course, whatever your rate is." "We'll figure that out later," Ryan said. "Let me just check on my daughter first. Make sure she's okay." "She can come too," Natalie said quickly. "If that makes this easier, I don't mind." But Ryan shook his head. "She's still asleep. I'll just be a minute." He went inside, moving quietly up the stairs to Emma's room. She was still curled up with her rabbit, breathing softly. He left a note on the kitchen table. Gone to help the neighbor. Back soon. Text me when you wake up. Love, Dad. Then grabbed his toolbox from the garage. When he stepped back outside, Natalie was still standing by the fence, waiting like she was afraid he might have changed his mind. Ready? He asked. She nodded, then turned and started walking back across the street. Ryan followed. The inside of Natalie Vaughn's house was exactly what Ryan had expected, and nothing like it at the same time. The layout was open and modern, with polished concrete floors, stark white walls, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than a home. Everything was immaculate, perfectly arranged, aesthetically flawless, and completely, utterly lifeless. There were no family photos on the walls, no books on the shelves, no throw blankets draped over the designer couch, no coffee mugs left on the counter, no shoes kicked off by the door. It looked like a showroom, like no one actually lived here. I know it's cold, Natalie said, watching him take it all in. I kept meaning to personalize it, but I never got around to it. Where should I start? Ryan asked, setting his toolbox down. The kitchen sink. She led him through the living room into a kitchen that was all stainless steel and marble. The sink was indeed leaking, a steady drip, drip, drip into a bowl she'd placed underneath. It started a few months ago. Just a little drip. But it's gotten worse. Ryan knelt down and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. The pipes were corroded, the connections loose. This wasn't a quick fix. It would need new parts. I can patch this for now, he said, pulling out his wrench. But you're going to need to replace the whole assembly eventually. Can you do that? Yeah. I'll need to pick up parts, though. Whatever you need. She hovered nearby, arms crossed, watching him work with an intensity that made him self-conscious. You don't have to stand there, he said gently. I know what I'm doing. I know. But she didn't move. I'm not used to having anyone in my space. I can tell. She let out a soft, surprised laugh. That obvious? Little bit. Ryan worked in silence for a few minutes, tightening connections and cleaning out mineral deposits. The dripping slowed, then stopped. That should hold you for now, he said, closing the cabinet and standing up. But seriously, this needs to be replaced. These pipes are older than they should be for a house this new. The builder cut corners, Natalie said. I didn't find out until after I'd already bought the place. That happens. Ryan wiped his hands on a rag. What else is on the list? She led him through the house, pointing out problem after problem. The hallway lights that flickered because of loose wiring. The bathroom cabinet door that had pulled free from its hinges. The loose floorboard on the back porch. The window in the guest bedroom that wouldn't close properly. With each new issue, Ryan understood more clearly what was happening here. Natalie Vaughn wasn't just avoiding repair people. She was avoiding life. She'd locked herself inside this beautiful, empty house and let it fall apart around her rather than let anyone in. Why now? He asked as he tightened the screws on the cabinet door. Why ask for help now? She was silent for a long moment. Because I'm tired, she finally said. I'm so tired of pretending everything is fine when it's all falling apart. I'm tired of being alone in a broken house, pretending I chose this. Ryan set down his screwdriver and looked at her. Did you choose this? I thought I did. She leaned against the doorframe, arms wrapped around herself. After my dad died, I couldn't stand being in our family home anymore. Everywhere I looked, I saw him. His chair, his coffee mug, his reading glasses on the side table. So I sold everything and moved here. I thought if I started fresh, if I kept everything minimal and controlled, I wouldn't have to feel it anymore. Feel what? The grief. The loss. The terrifying reality that everyone you love eventually leaves you. The words hit Ryan square in the chest. He knew that feeling, knew it intimately. Your wife, Natalie said quietly. The neighbors told me. I'm sorry. It was 4 years ago. Does it get easier? No, Ryan said honestly. You just get better at carrying it. She nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. The thing is, she continued, I thought I could just work through it, build my company, make my father proud, prove that his death didn't break me. but it did break me. I'm standing in $1 million house that I can't even maintain, running a company that's expanding faster than I can handle, and I can't remember the last time I had a real conversation with another human being. You're having one now, Ryan pointed out. She smiled faintly. I suppose I am. Ryan finished tightening the last screw and tested the cabinet door. It swung smoothly now, no longer hanging crooked. That's done. What's next? The porch. They went outside together, and Ryan examined the loose board Natalie had mentioned. It was worse than she'd described. The wood was rotted through in places, soft and spongy under his touch. This whole section needs to be replaced, he said. It's not safe. Can you do it? Yeah, but not today. I'll need to get lumber, and it's a bigger job than the others. Okay, she hesitated. Would you come back to finish it? Ryan looked up at her. The morning sun caught her face at an angle that made her look younger, more vulnerable. This wasn't the powerful CEO the neighbors whispered about. This was just a woman who'd been alone too long, asking for help in the only way she knew how. Yeah, he said. I'll come back. The relief in her eyes was unmistakable. They went back inside, and Ryan spent the next hour addressing the smaller issues, the flickering lights, the sticky window, a loose towel rack in the powder room. Natalie followed him from room to room, gradually relaxing as she got used to having someone else in her space. At some point, she started talking, not about the repairs, but about everything else. About her company, about the pressure of rapid growth, about the board members who wanted her to expand into markets she wasn't sure she was ready for. About her father, who'd built his own tech company from nothing and taught her everything she knew. About the loneliness of being at the top, where everyone wanted something from you and no one just wanted you. Ryan listened while he worked, offering the occasional comment, but mostly just letting her talk. He understood the need to fill silence with words, to hear your own voice saying things you'd never said out loud before. I'm sorry, she said eventually, catching herself. You came here to fix my sink, not listen to me unload my entire life story. I don't mind, Ryan said, and meant it. She smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. You're a good listener. Comes with being a single parent. Emma talks constantly. How old is she? 6, just finished kindergarten. That must be hard, doing it alone. Some days are harder than others. Ryan tested the window latch he'd been adjusting. But she's worth it. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. Natalie watched him work for a moment longer, then said quietly, I wanted kids. Before everything fell apart, my father used to joke that I'd make a terrible mother because I was too much of a workaholic. But I always thought, someday, when the company was stable, when I had time. She laughed softly. Time. As if I'd ever have time. It's not too late, Ryan said. Isn't it? You're what, 35? 37. Then no, it's not too late. She didn't respond, just looked out the window at her perfectly manicured yard. Ryan finished with the latch and closed his toolbox. I think that's all I can do today without getting parts. I'll make a list of what you need and pick everything up tomorrow. How much do I owe you? Nothing yet. We'll settle up when everything's done. Ryan, it's fine, he said firmly. Really. They walked back to the front door together. Ryan stepped out onto the porch, then turned back to find Natalie watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for fixing things, for not making this weird. Why would it be weird? I just told a complete stranger that I haven't had a man in my house for 2 years and then invited you inside. Most people would find that weird. Most people haven't lost someone who made them scared to trust anyone new, Ryan said. She stared at him, and for a moment he thought he'd said too much. Crossed some invisible line. Then she whispered, How did you know? Because I spent a year doing the same thing after my wife died. Kept everyone at arm's length. Convinced myself I was protecting Emma by not letting anyone new into our lives. It wasn't until one of Emma's teachers pulled me aside and told me I was teaching my daughter to be afraid of connection that I realized what I was doing. What changed? I started saying yes to things, coffee with other parents, play dates with Emma's classmates, help when the neighbors needed it, small stuff, baby steps. until eventually having people in my life didn't feel dangerous anymore. Natalie absorbed this, her dark eyes searching his face. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You asked me inside, Ryan pointed out. That's a start. She smiled faintly. I suppose it is. Ryan picked up his toolbox and started down the porch steps, then paused. Hey, Natalie? Yes? You're doing better than you think you are. He didn't wait for a response, just headed back across the street to his own house, where Emma was probably awake by now and wondering where he'd gone. Behind him, Natalie Vaughn stood in the doorway of her silent house and watched him go, something shifting inside her that she couldn't quite name. It felt dangerously close to hope. Over the following week, Ryan found himself crossing the street to Natalie's house almost every day. He'd tell himself it was just about the repairs. He needed to replace the kitchen pipes, fix the porch, address all the small problems that had been piling up. But somewhere between replacing the corroded plumbing and installing new boards on the back deck, he started to realize it wasn't just about the repairs anymore. It was about the woman who lived in the house. Natalie was different when she wasn't performing the role of powerful CEO. She was softer, more uncertain, more real. She asked questions about his work, about Emma, about how he'd learned to do all these repairs. She admitted she'd grown up wealthy, with people who fixed things for you, and had never learned basic home maintenance. My father believed in education and ambition, she told him one afternoon while he worked on the porch. But he never taught me how to change a tire or unclog a drain. Those were things you paid people to do. Nothing wrong with that, Ryan said, measuring a new board. Except now I'm helpless in my own house. You're not helpless. You just never learned. There's a difference. She sat down on the porch step, watching him work. It had become a pattern. She'd hover anxiously at first, then gradually relax and just talk while his hands stayed busy. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you say yes? When I asked for help, why did you agree? Ryan set down his measuring tape and considered the question. Honestly, because you looked like you needed someone to say yes, and I know what that feels like. When? After my wife died. I was drowning, but I couldn't ask for help. Couldn't admit that I was falling apart. My brother finally just showed up one day and refused to leave until I let him help. Changed everything. Is he still around, your brother? He moved to Portland for work. We still talk every week, though. Natalie nodded slowly. I have a sister. We haven't spoken in over a year. Why not? Because she told me I was burying myself in work to avoid dealing with grief, and I told her she didn't understand what it was like to lose the one person who actually believed in you. She paused. She was right, of course, but I wasn't ready to hear it. Are you ready now? Maybe. She drew her knees up to her chest, looking younger than her 37 years. I don't know. Everything I thought I had figured out turned out to be me running away. From grief, from connection, from the terrifying possibility that if I let myself care about someone again, I might lose them too. Ryan hammered a nail into the new board, thinking about how to respond. You know what Emma asked me last night? What? She asked why the lady across the street always looked so sad. Natalie's eyes widened. She said that? 6-year-olds are perceptive. What did you tell her? I said sometimes grown-ups carry heavy things that make them tired, but that doesn't mean they'll always be sad. Do you believe that? Yeah, Ryan said. I do. Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Your daughter is lucky to have you. You keep saying that. Because it's true. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. I should let you work. I have a conference call in 20 minutes. But she didn't move, just stood there, looking at him like she wanted to say something else. What? Ryan asked gently. Nothing. Just thank you. For this. She gestured vaguely at the porch, but he understood she meant more than the repairs. Any time. She smiled, then went inside. Ryan went back to work, but his mind wasn't entirely on the task anymore. He was thinking about the loneliness in Natalie's eyes, the way she lit up when they talked about anything other than business or loss, the careful way she was learning to let him into her space without immediately building walls again. He was thinking about how easy it would be to care about her, and how dangerous that might be. Emma met Natalie on a Saturday afternoon 2 weeks after the first repair visit. Ryan had mentioned he was going across the street to finish the porch work, and Emma had immediately asked if she could come. Ms. Vaughn might be busy, Ryan had started, but Emma was already putting on her shoes. You said she's nice. I said she's our neighbor. Same thing. There was no arguing with 6-year-old logic, so Ryan had texted Natalie to warn her. Her response had been immediate. I'd love to meet her. Natalie answered the door dressed more casually than Ryan had ever seen her. Jeans, a soft gray sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked almost nervous. Hi, she said, her eyes dropping to Emma. You must be Emma. Emma, who could be shy with new people, looked up at Natalie with serious consideration. Then she said, You have a really big house. Ryan winced, but Natalie laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed her entire face. I do, she agreed. Want to see inside? Emma nodded enthusiastically. Natalie led them through the house, and Ryan watched as Emma took in everything with wide eyes. The high ceilings, the modern art, the kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. Do you live here all by yourself? Emma asked. I do. That's sad. Emma, Ryan said quickly, but Natalie shook her head. No, she's right. It is sad. Emma studied her for another moment, then announced, You should get a dog. A dog? Dogs are good company, and they make you go outside. Natalie glanced at Ryan, who shrugged helplessly. She's been lobbying for a dog for 6 months. I see. Natalie crouched down to Emma's level. What kind of dog would I get? A big one, Emma said immediately, so it can protect you. From what? From being lonely. The words hung in the air. Ryan saw Natalie's expression flicker, surprise, then something that looked like pain, then a warmth that made his chest tight. That's very wise, Natalie said softly. Maybe I will get a dog. Really? Emma's face lit up. Maybe. I'll have to think about it. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She wandered over to the windows, pressing her nose against the glass to look at the backyard. You have a swing set. I do? Natalie looked genuinely surprised. The previous owners must have left it, Ryan said, following Emma's gaze. Sure enough, there was an old wooden swing set half hidden by overgrown bushes in the far corner of the yard. I never even noticed it, Natalie admitted. I don't spend much time in the backyard. Can I go swing? Emma asked. If Ms. Vaughn doesn't mind. Of course not. Natalie opened the back door, and Emma raced outside. Ryan and Natalie followed at a slower pace, watching as Emma scrambled onto one of the swings and started pumping her legs. Higher, she called out. Push me higher. Ryan started to move forward, but Natalie was faster. She walked over to Emma and gave the swing a gentle push, then another, until Emma was sailing through the air, laughing with pure joy. Ryan stood on the back porch and watched them, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. When was the last time he'd seen Natalie smile like that? When was the last time her house had heard the sound of a child's laughter? Your turn, Emma announced, jumping off the swing mid-arc and landing with practiced ease. Ms. Natalie, you should swing too. Oh, I don't know if... Please? Emma deployed her most effective weapon, the earnest, hopeful look that Ryan could never resist. Natalie glanced at Ryan, who gave her an encouraging nod. Okay, she said, sounding both amused and uncertain. But I haven't done this in about 30 years. She settled onto the swing, looking ridiculously elegant even in this mundane setting. Emma stood behind her and pushed with all her might, barely moving the swing at all. I got it, Ryan said, walking over. He gave the swing a firm push, sending Natalie forward. She gasped, then laughed, that same genuine laugh from earlier. Ryan pushed again and she went higher, her hair streaming behind her, her face open and unguarded in a way he'd never seen. She looked free. Higher, Emma commanded, and Ryan obliged, pushing Natalie higher and higher until she was flying, laughing like a child herself. When she finally dragged her feet to slow down, she was breathless and bright-eyed. I forgot how much fun that was. When's the last time you went on a swing? Ryan asked. College, maybe? My father thought they were juvenile. Your father was wrong, Emma announced with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. Natalie laughed again. You know what? You're right. He was wrong about a lot of things. They spent the next hour in the backyard. Emma explored every corner, pointing out birds and flowers and demanding to know what everything was called. Natalie admitted she didn't know half the plants in her own yard, so Ryan identified them. Lavender, rosemary, the rhododendrons that had grown wild without pruning. "This whole area needs work," he said, surveying the overgrown garden beds. "When's the last time anyone tended to this?" "Never," Natalie admitted. "I had a service do the lawn, but they didn't touch the garden." "Why not?" She shrugged. "I never asked them to. I didn't think it mattered." Ryan looked at the neglected plants, the potential buried under weeds and neglect. "It matters." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "You mean the garden?" "I mean all of it." Their eyes met, and Ryan saw her understand what he wasn't saying. The garden, the house, her life. All of it mattered, even if she'd convinced herself otherwise. "Dad's really good at making things grow," Emma announced, completely oblivious to the charged moment between the adults. "He can fix anything." "I'm learning that," Natalie said, still looking at Ryan. "Can we come back?" Emma asked. "To swing?" "Emma, we can't just—" "Yes," Natalie interrupted. "You can come back anytime you want." Emma beamed. "Can we come tomorrow?" Natalie smiled. "If your dad says it's okay." Ryan should have said no, should have established boundaries, kept things professional, remembered that this was just a neighbor he was helping with repairs. But Emma was looking at him with such hope, and Natalie was looking at him with something that made his carefully controlled world feel suddenly fragile. "Sure," he heard himself say. "We can come tomorrow." That evening, after Emma was in bed, Ryan stood at his kitchen window looking across the street. Lights were on in Natalie's house. Not the usual cold LED glare, but warm, golden light that made the modern architecture look almost welcoming. He thought about the sound of her laughter on the swing, the way she'd looked at Emma with something that might have been longing, the moment when their eyes had met in the garden and he'd felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He was in dangerous territory. He knew that. But for the first time in 4 years, dangerous didn't feel like something to run from. It felt like something worth exploring. Across the street, Natalie Vaughn stood at her own window, looking back at Ryan's small wooden house, and thinking about how strange it was that the sound of a child's laughter could make a home feel less empty. She'd spent 2 years building walls, and somehow, in the span of 2 weeks, a single father and his 6-year-old daughter had started to take them down. Tomorrow came, and then the day after that, and the day after that. What had started as a simple handyman arrangement quietly transformed into something neither Ryan nor Natalie had planned for. Emma became the bridge between them, her innocent enthusiasm demolishing the careful distance adults knew how to maintain. She'd knock on Natalie's door asking to use the swing set, or she'd bring over drawings she'd made at school, or she'd simply appear with her father and announce that they were there to help Ms. Natalie with her broken house. Natalie never turned them away. The repairs continued, but they became almost secondary to the conversations that filled the spaces between hammering and drilling. Ryan would work on replacing a light fixture or repairing a cabinet while Natalie sat nearby, talking about things she'd never said out loud before. The pressure of her company's expansion, the board meeting where she'd had to defend her vision against investors who saw her as too young, too female, too emotional. The night she'd wake up at 3 in the morning with her father's voice in her head, telling her she wasn't ready for the responsibility she'd taken on. He never said that, she confessed one afternoon while Ryan worked on fixing a sticking door in her home office. Not out loud, but I always felt like I was trying to prove something to him, that I could be as good as he was. Better, even. Sounds exhausting, Ryan said, planing down the edge of the door. It is. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her laptop abandoned beside her. I built the company thinking it would make him proud, and then he died before he could see what it became. So now I'm just building it for a ghost. Ryan tested the door. It swung smoothly now, no longer catching on the frame. What would you build if you weren't building it for him? The question clearly caught her off guard. I don't know. I've never thought about it that way. Maybe you should. She was quiet for a long time, watching him work. Then she said, Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Sure. I hate my job. Ryan looked up at her. What? Not all of it, she amended quickly. I love the design work, the creative problem solving. working with clients to bring their vision to life. But the rest of it, the board meetings, the expansion strategy, the constant pressure to grow bigger and faster, I hate it. I'm good at it, but I hate it. Then why do you do it? Because stopping feels like giving up, like admitting my father was wrong to trust me with his legacy. Or, Ryan said carefully, stopping could mean honoring what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. Natalie pulled her knees to her chest, a gesture Ryan had learned meant she was processing something difficult. My therapist said almost the exact same thing. You have a therapist? Started seeing her 6 months ago. My sister threatened to fly out here and drag me to one herself if I didn't go voluntarily. She smiled faintly. Best decision I've made in years, actually. What does she say about all this? Ryan gestured vaguely at the house, at the situation. She says I'm afraid of being vulnerable, that I've equated control with safety, and anything that threatens my sense of control feels dangerous. Natalie paused. She also said that letting you help me was probably one of the healthiest things I've done since my father died. Ryan felt heat creep up his neck. She said that? Well, she said letting someone into my physical space was a good first step toward letting someone into my emotional space. I inferred the rest. They looked at each other for a moment too long, the air between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Emma's voice from the backyard shattered the moment. Dad! Ms. Natalie, come see what I found. They both stood, grateful for the interruption, and went outside to find Emma crouched by the overgrown garden bed, dirt on her hands and wonder on her face. Look! She held up a bulb she'd unearthed. What is it? Ryan knelt beside her, examining it. Looks like a tulip bulb. Must have been planted years ago and forgotten. Can we make it grow? Emma asked. We'd have to plant it properly. Clean up this whole bed, actually. He looked up at Natalie. This would be a whole project. I don't mind, Natalie said quickly, if you have time. Can we, Dad, please? Ryan looked at his daughter's eager face, then at Natalie's hopeful expression, and knew there was only one answer he could give. Yeah, we can do that. Emma whooped with joy and immediately started pulling weeds with her bare hands. Ryan moved to help her, and after a moment's hesitation, Natalie joined them. They worked in the garden until the sun started to set, pulling weeds and clearing away years of neglect. Emma chattered constantly, asking questions about every plant and insect she encountered. Natalie admitted she didn't know the difference between a weed and a flower, so Ryan patiently explained how to tell them apart. This one's lavender, he said, uncovering a woody stem that had been strangled by ivy. Still alive, just needs to be freed up and cut back. Like me, Natalie said, then laughed at her own dramatic comparison. Sorry, that was very on the nose. But accurate, Ryan asked. She considered it. Maybe. I don't know anymore. I spent so long building walls that I'm not sure what's underneath them. I guess we'll find out, Ryan said, and the way he said we made something flutter in Natalie's chest. As the light faded, Emma started to yawn, her earlier energy depleted. She'd worked harder than either adult, her clothes covered in dirt and her hair escaping from its ponytail in wild tangles. Someone needs a bath, Ryan said, scooping her up. I'm not tired, Emma protested, even as her head dropped onto his shoulder. Of course not. He looked at Natalie over his daughter's head. We should go. Thank you, Natalie said. For today. For all of this. We'll come back tomorrow. Finish what we started. I'd like that. Ryan carried Emma across the street, and Natalie stood in her garden, which suddenly felt like something that mattered, watching them go. The house felt different when she went back inside, less like a museum and more like a place where things were growing. The next afternoon, Ryan arrived with gardening tools and a plan. Emma immediately ran to the garden and resumed her self-appointed role as chief weed puller, while Ryan began the more technical work of pruning and reshaping. Natalie brought out iced tea and sandwiches, and they took a break under the shade of her back porch. Emma, filthy and happy, devoured 2 sandwiches while explaining in elaborate detail everything she'd learned about flowers from a library book Ryan had checked out for her. And tulips come in every color except blue, she concluded, which is sad because blue is my favorite color. Mine too, Natalie said. Emma's eyes lit up. Really? Really? What else do you like? It was such a simple question, but Natalie found herself struggling to answer. What did she like? Beyond work, beyond the carefully constructed image of success she presented to the world, what actually brought her joy? I used to love reading, she said slowly, before I got so busy. I'd spend entire weekends just lost in books. What kind of books? Emma asked. Mystery novels mostly, the kind where you try to figure out who did it before the detective does. Do you still read them? Natalie shook her head. I haven't read a book for pleasure in over 2 years. That's sad, Emma said with the blunt honesty of childhood. Yeah, Natalie agreed quietly. It really is. Ryan had been listening silently, but now he spoke. There's a bookstore downtown, the independent one on 5th Street. They have a whole mystery section. I know the one, Natalie said. I drive past it every day on my way to the office. Maybe you should stop driving past it. Their eyes met, and Natalie understood what he was really saying. Stop driving past the things that bring you joy. Stop treating your life like an obstacle course to get through. Stop surviving and start living. Maybe I should, she said. Emma, oblivious to the weight of the conversation, finished her sandwich and announced, I'm going to find more bulbs. She raced back to the garden, leaving the adults alone. She's wonderful, Natalie said, watching Emma dig enthusiastically in the dirt. She's a handful, Ryan said, but his voice was warm with affection. Does she remember her mother? A little, mostly just feelings and impressions. She was only 2 when it happened. What was she like? Your wife? Ryan was quiet for a moment, and Natalie worried she'd overstepped. But then he said, Sarah was a force of nature, completely fearless. She could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were the most important person there. Emma gets that from her. That ability to just connect with people without trying. How did you meet? College. She was an art major. I was studying landscape design. We met at a party and spent the whole night talking about how cities needed more green spaces. She thought I was pretentious. I thought she was chaotic. We were both right. He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. She painted big, wild, abstract pieces that somehow made perfect sense. The house was always covered in paint splatters. Drove me crazy at the time. Now I'd give anything to see her mess up the kitchen one more time. I'm sorry, Natalie said softly. It was a drunk driver. She was coming home from an art show, got hit head-on at an intersection. The other driver walked away without a scratch. Sarah died at the scene. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched. The randomness of it is what kills me. If she'd left 5 minutes earlier or later, if she'd taken a different route, if that guy hadn't decided to get behind the wheel after drinking half a bottle of whiskey. So many variables, and they all lined up wrong. How do you live with that? The what-ifs? Some days better than others. Emma helps. Having to be present for her means I can't disappear into the grief completely. And eventually, you learn to carry it. It becomes part of you, like an old injury that aches when it rains. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. My father had a heart attack in his office. His assistant found him. He was on the phone with a client 1 minute and gone the next. Just gone. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. How long ago? 2 years, 1 month, and 16 days. She laughed wetly. I still count the days, isn't that pathetic? No, Ryan said firmly. It's human. They sat in silence for a while, watching Emma discover another bulb and celebrate like she'd found buried treasure. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, turning everything golden. Can I ask you something? Natalie said eventually. Sure. Why are you really doing this? The repairs, the garden, all of it. You could have said no. You could have recommended a handyman and left it at that. Ryan thought about how to answer truthfully. Because you looked at me like I was the answer to a question you'd been afraid to ask. And I know what it's like to be that afraid. To be so wrapped up in protecting yourself that you forget how to let anyone in. And you wanted to help me. I wanted to know if I could help you. There's a difference. What difference? One is about you, the other is about me. He met her eyes. I spent 4 years being just a dad, just doing the routine, checking the boxes, making sure Emma had what she needed. And that was enough. It had to be enough. But then you showed up at my fence asking for help. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be more than just a guy getting through the day. Natalie's breath caught. Ryan, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable, he interrupted. I just want you to know that you helping yourself by asking for help also helped me. So it's not charity. It's not me being some noble savior. It's mutual. Mutual, Natalie repeated, testing the word. Yeah. Emma came running back, breaking the moment with perfect timing. I found 6 more. Can we plant them all? We'll plant every single one, Ryan promised, and Emma squealed with delight. They worked until dinner time, then Ryan insisted he needed to get Emma home and fed. Natalie walked them to the front door, and Emma surprised her by throwing her arms around Natalie's waist in a fierce hug. I like your house, Emma declared. It's not sad anymore. Natalie's throat tightened. She knelt down and hugged Emma back. I like it better too. Thank you for helping. After they left, Natalie went back to the garden and stood among the cleared beds and newly planted bulbs. Her hands were dirty. Her expensive jeans were stained with grass and soil. Her carefully styled hair had fallen out of its clip and was hanging in her face. She felt more alive than she had in years. That night, for the first time since moving into the house, Natalie ordered takeout instead of eating another protein bar at her desk. She sat at her dining room table, actually sat at it, rather than just walking past it, and ate slowly, tasting the food instead of just consuming fuel. Then she did something even more radical. She went to the empty bookshelf in her living room and measured it. Tomorrow, on her lunch break, she would go to that bookstore Ryan had mentioned. She would buy books, actual physical books that she would read for pleasure. It was a small thing, probably insignificant to anyone else, but to Natalie it felt revolutionary. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Ryan would come over after dropping Emma at school, working on the house's larger repair projects, replacing the kitchen pipes, fixing the loose boards on the back deck, addressing the wiring issues that made the hallway lights flicker. Sometimes Emma would join them after school, turning the backyard into her kingdom while the adults worked. Other times, Ryan would come alone in the evenings after Emma was asleep, and those were the times when the conversations went deeper. Natalie told him about her childhood, growing up wealthy but lonely, with parents who loved her but didn't quite know how to show it. Her father buried in work, her mother in charity committees, her sister, 5 years younger, who'd rebelled against the whole thing and now lived in Barcelona running a small art gallery. We used to be close, Natalie said one evening while Ryan worked on replacing a broken windowsill. Before our father died, but after, she wanted me to grieve with her, and I wanted to work. She said I was running away. I said she was being dramatic. Things were said that probably can't be unsaid. Have you tried? Talking to her? A few times? It always ends in a fight. Maybe you're both trying to be right instead of trying to understand each other. Natalie absorbed this, watching Ryan's careful hands seal the window. You're very wise for a landscaper. He laughed. Landscapers can't be wise? That's not what I meant. She stopped, frustrated with herself. I keep doing that, making assumptions based on jobs or status or whatever. My father's influence, probably. He categorized people. Most people do. You don't. Sure I do. I just try to be aware when I'm doing it. Natalie tilted her head, studying him. What category am I in? Complicated, he said without hesitation. She laughed. Fair. Also lonely. Also trying really hard to be something you think you should be instead of what you actually are. And what am I actually? Ryan turned to look at her fully. I'm still figuring that out, but I think you are too. The honesty between them had become effortless. They'd somehow skipped past the polite acquaintance phase and landed in something that felt like friendship, but carried an undercurrent of tension neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Natalie found herself watching for Ryan's truck to pull up, found herself timing her coffee breaks to coincide with when he'd arrive, found herself disappointed on days when work kept him away. Ryan was equally affected, though he tried to hide it. He caught himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering what she was doing in some high-stakes board meeting, imagining her reading one of the mystery novels she'd started buying, replaying conversations and the way she'd laugh, really laugh, not the polite CEO laugh, when he said something unexpected. Emma, perceptive as always, noticed the shift before either adult acknowledged it. "Do you like Ms. Natalie?" she asked one night while Ryan was tucking her in. "Of course I like her. She's our neighbor." No, I mean, do you like her like her? Ryan felt his face heat. Where did you learn that phrase? Sarah's mom said it. She said you smile different when you talk about Ms. Natalie. Sarah's mom should mind her own business. But do you? Ryan sat on the edge of Emma's bed, trying to figure out how to answer honestly without crossing any parental boundaries. Ms. Natalie is very nice, and I'm glad we're friends with her. But you think she's pretty. Emma, it's okay if you do. I think she's pretty too, and she's nice, and she's not sad anymore. Emma yawned, her interrogation losing steam. I think she likes you too. Go to sleep, kiddo. Okay. She snuggled into her pillow, already half asleep. But Dad? Yeah? It's okay if you like someone. Mom would want you to be happy. The words hit Ryan square in the chest. He kissed Emma's forehead, turned off the light, and stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to get his breathing under control, out of the mouths of babes. The truth was, he did like Natalie, more than he'd planned to, more than was probably wise. But Emma was right. Sarah would have wanted him to be happy. She'd been fierce about that in her final months, making him promise he wouldn't close himself off, wouldn't let grief turn him bitter. He'd kept that promise for Emma's sake, but somewhere along the way he'd forgotten it applied to himself too. The next day, Ryan arrived at Natalie's house to find her on the phone in her office, pacing and speaking in the clipped, professional tone she used for business. He let himself in. She'd given him a key weeks ago and went to work on the kitchen cabinets. 20 minutes later, she found him. I hate investors, she announced, dropping onto one of the kitchen stools. Rough call? They want me to open an office in New York, expand our client base to include more corporate work, basically turn the company into everything I created it to avoid becoming. What do you want? I want to tell them to shove their expansion plans. She rubbed her temples. But I also don't want to tank the company out of stubbornness. Those aren't your only two options. Aren't they? Ryan set down his screwdriver and faced her. You could compromise, take some of their suggestions, reject others. It's your company, right? You're the CEO? Technically, yes, but they control enough shares to make my life difficult if I don't play ball. So you're going to let them dictate your life because it's easier than fighting? The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and Natalie's eyes flashed. You don't understand the position I'm in. You're right. I don't. I'm just a landscaper who fixes things. He heard the edge in his own voice and hated it. But from where I'm standing, you spend a lot of time doing things you don't want to do because you're afraid of disappointing people who are already disappointed. That's not fair. Isn't it? You've told me yourself you hate half your job, that you built this company for your father, not yourself, that you're exhausted and lonely and scared. But instead of changing anything, you just keep pushing forward because stopping feels like failure. Natalie stood up, her face flushed. You think it's that simple? Just quit? Walk away? I think it's more complicated to stay in a situation that's killing you slowly. They stared at each other, the kitchen crackling with tension. This was their first real argument, and Ryan wasn't sure how they'd gotten here. One minute they were talking about investors, the next they were circling something much deeper. I should go, he said, reaching for his toolbox. Ryan, wait. I'm sorry. I overstepped. Your business decisions aren't my concern. That's not... She stopped, frustrated. I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the situation, and maybe at myself. He paused. For what? For caring what you think. For letting you see enough of my life that you can call me out on my bullshit. She laughed without humor. I've spent 2 years avoiding exactly this. People who ask hard questions. People who make me feel things I've been trying not to feel. What are you feeling? The question hung between them, dangerous and necessary. Scared, Natalie admitted. Confused. Like maybe I've been going in the wrong direction for so long that I don't know how to turn around. Ryan set down his toolbox. You don't have to turn around. You can just stop. Figure out where you actually want to go. What if I don't know? Then you figure that out too. She looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. How did this happen? How did I go from keeping everyone at arm's length to letting you see all my broken pieces? I came to fix your sink, Ryan said. You let me in, the rest just happened. That simple? That's simple. Natalie moved closer and Ryan's heart rate kicked up. They were standing in her kitchen, surrounded by half-repaired cabinets and the tools of his trade, and the air between them felt electric. "I'm glad you overstepped," she said quietly. "Someone needed to." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She smiled, genuine and unguarded. "You're the first person in years who's treated me like a person instead of a position. Do you know how rare that is? I'm just being myself." "Exactly." They stood there, caught in the gravity of what was building between them. Ryan knew he should step back, maintain the professional distance that had already blurred beyond recognition. But Natalie was looking at him like he was something precious, and he couldn't remember the last time anyone had looked at him that way. "I should still go," he made himself say. "Let you get back to work." Disappointment flickered across her face, but she nodded. "Okay, will you come back tomorrow?" "If you want me to." "I want you to." The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning, and they both knew it. Ryan left, but the conversation stayed with him all evening. Emma noticed his distraction at dinner, asking 3 times if he was okay. He assured her he was fine, but that night, lying in bed, he admitted to himself what he'd been avoiding for weeks. He was falling for Natalie Vaughn. Not the CEO version the world saw, but the real woman underneath. The one who laughed on swings and dug in gardens and admitted she was lonely. The one who was trying so hard to be strong that she'd forgotten how to be soft. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely impractical, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Across the street, Natalie stood at her bedroom window, looking at Ryan's house and feeling the exact same confusion. The walls she'd built so carefully were crumbling, and instead of panic, she felt something that might have been relief. Maybe being vulnerable wasn't the same as being weak. Maybe letting someone in wasn't the same as losing control. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to find out. The tension between them didn't disappear after that conversation in the kitchen. If anything, it intensified, humming beneath every interaction like a live wire waiting to spark. Ryan came back the next day, and the day after that, but something had shifted. They were more careful with each other now, hyper-aware of proximity and loaded silences. When their hands accidentally brushed while reaching for the same tool, they both jerked back like they'd been burned. When their eyes met across a room, they held the gaze a beat too long before looking away. Emma, blissfully oblivious to adult complications, continued to treat Natalie's house as an extension of their own home. She'd burst through the door after school, calling out for both Ryan and Natalie, excited to show them a drawing or report on the garden's progress. The tulip bulbs they'd planted were starting to sprout, and Emma checked on them obsessively, convinced her attention was what made them grow. "They need encouragement," she explained seriously to Natalie one afternoon. "Dad says plants are like people. They do better when someone believes in them." Natalie glanced at Ryan, who was deliberately focused on the cabinet hinge he was adjusting. "Your dad is very smart." "I know," Emma said matter-of-factly. "He knows everything." "Not everything," Ryan muttered, but there was a smile in his voice. These moments of domestic ease made the underlying tension even harder to navigate. It would have been easier if they could just acknowledge what was happening between them, but neither seemed willing to take that first step. Ryan was afraid of pushing Natalie before she was ready. Natalie was afraid of wanting something she didn't know how to have. So they existed in this strange limbo, growing closer while pretending they weren't. The weather turned volatile in mid-July, the summer heat giving way to afternoon thunderstorms that rolled through with increasing frequency. Emma loved watching the storms from Natalie's big windows, pressing her nose to the glass while lightning fractured the sky. "It's like the sky is breaking," she said one evening, her voice filled with awe. "Or like it's trying to say something," Natalie offered, standing beside her. "What would the sky say?" "Maybe it's just reminding us that some things are bigger than we are, that we don't control everything, no matter how hard we try." Ryan, organizing his tools across the room, caught the weight in her words. She wasn't really talking about the weather. That particular storm passed quickly, leaving behind the thick smell of ozone and wet pavement. But the meteorologists were predicting worse to come. A major system was building off the coast, promising heavy rain and high winds by the weekend. Friday afternoon arrived with an ominous gray sky and air that felt heavy enough to touch. Ryan finished up the last of the deck repairs while Natalie worked in her office, and Emma played in the garden, racing against the approaching storm to give her flowers one last watering. We should head home, Ryan called to Emma as the first fat raindrops began to fall. It's going to get bad. Emma reluctantly abandoned the garden and ran inside to say goodbye to Natalie. Ryan followed, finding them in the living room where Natalie was closing her laptop with an exhausted sigh. Long day? He asked. Endless conference call with investors. They're still pushing for the New York expansion. She rubbed her eyes. I told them I'd think about it. That's progress, right? You didn't just say yes? Baby steps. She smiled tiredly, then looked at Emma. Heading home? Dad says there's a big storm coming. He's right. You should get inside before it hits. They said their goodbyes and crossed the street just as the rain began in earnest. By the time Ryan got Emma fed and bathed, the storm was raging, wind howling around the house and rain lashing against the windows. Is Miss Natalie scared? Emma asked as Ryan tucked her into bed. I'm sure she's fine. She's a grown-up. Grown-ups get scared too, Emma said wisely. You get scared sometimes. How do you know that? I can tell. Your face gets all tight and you breathe funny. Ryan kissed her forehead, marveling at his daughter's perceptiveness. You're too smart for your own good. I know, she yawned. Will you check on her? Miss Natalie? She's fine, sweetheart. Please, just text her. Ryan sighed but pulled out his phone. He typed out a quick message. Emma wants to make sure you're okay in the storm. All good over there? The response came almost immediately. Tell Emma I'm fine. Thanks for checking. He showed Emma the message and she seemed satisfied. Within minutes she was asleep, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight as thunder rumbled overhead. Ryan went downstairs and tried to distract himself with television, but he couldn't focus. The storm was getting worse, the kind of weather that made you grateful for solid walls and a roof over your head. He found himself thinking about Natalie in that big empty house, probably still working despite the late hour, pretending the storm didn't bother her. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. It was Natalie, and the message made his stomach drop. I need help. Water coming into the basement. Don't know what to do. Ryan was moving before he finished reading. He grabbed his toolbox and a flashlight, pulled on a rain jacket, and headed into the storm. The wind nearly knocked him sideways as he crossed the street. Rain soaked through his jeans in seconds, and by the time he reached Natalie's door, he was drenched. She yanked it open before he could knock, her face pale with panic. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I didn't know who else to call. There's so much water and I can't find where it's coming from and… Show me, Ryan interrupted gently. She led him through the house to the basement stairs. He could hear rushing water before he saw it, and when Natalie flipped on the lights, his heart sank. Water was pouring through a window well, flooding across the concrete floor. When did this start? He asked, already moving down the stairs. Maybe 20 minutes ago? I came down to check the circuit breaker because the power flickered, and that's when I saw it. Her voice was shaking. I tried to stop it with towels, but there's too much. Ryan waded into the ankle-deep water, shining his flashlight around the space. The window well had filled with rainwater and debris, and the window seal had failed under the pressure. Water was streaming through the gap like a faucet. I need to seal the window from outside, he said. Do you have any plastic sheeting? Tarps? I don't know, maybe in the garage? Check there, bring anything waterproof. And grab some duct tape if you have it. Natalie ran upstairs while Ryan assessed the situation. The water was rising slowly but steadily. He needed to stop the flow before it got any worse. Then they could worry about cleanup. She returned with an armful of supplies, a plastic drop cloth, a tarp she'd found in the garage, and an entire roll of duct tape. Will this work? It'll have to. He grabbed the tarp and headed back upstairs and outside into the storm. The wind tried to rip the tarp from his hands as he made his way around the house to the window well. It was completely submerged, a pool of dark water churning with leaves and debris. Ryan cleared away what he could, then laid the tarp over the window well and weighed it down with bricks from Natalie's landscaping. It wasn't perfect, but the flow of water into the basement immediately slowed to a trickle. He went back inside, soaked and shivering. Natalie was in the basement with a mop and bucket, trying to push the water toward the drain in the corner. Here, Ryan said, taking the mop from her. I've got this. Can you get some towels? We need to soak up as much as we can before it damages anything. They worked together in focused silence, Ryan pushing water toward the drain while Natalie laid down towels to absorb what was left. The storm continued to rage outside, But inside the basement, they fell into a rhythm. Push, soak, wring out, repeat. It took nearly an hour to get the worst of it cleaned up. By then, they were both exhausted, wet, and covered in basement grime. Ryan's back ached from bending over, and his hands were raw from wringing out towels. "I think that's the best we can do tonight," he said, surveying their work. The floor was still damp, but the water was gone, and the drain was handling the trickle still seeping through. "You'll need to keep an eye on it until the rain stops, and that window needs to be properly resealed." "Okay." Natalie's voice was small, and when Ryan looked at her, he realized she was trembling. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. The worst is over." "I know. She stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm sorry for calling you, for dragging you out in this weather. I just panicked, and you were the only person I could think to—" "Natalie, stop." Ryan set down the mop and moved closer to her. "You did the right thing. This isn't something you could have handled alone." "I should have been able to. I'm supposed to be capable. I run a company. I manage million-dollar budgets. I shouldn't fall apart over a flooded basement. Being strong doesn't mean handling everything alone. Doesn't it?" She looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly broke him. "I've been alone for so long, I don't know how to be any other way." "You're not alone right now." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond the flooded basement and the storm. Natalie's breath hitched. "Ryan," thunder crashed so loudly that the house shook, and the lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging them into darkness. Natalie gasped, and Ryan felt her grab his arm. "It's okay," he said, pulling out his phone and turning on the flashlight. "Just the power. It'll come back on." But Natalie didn't let go of his arm. In the dim light from his phone, he could see tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm falling apart like this. It's just water. It's just a stupid basement, and "You're overwhelmed," Ryan said gently, "and you've been holding it together for too long. It's okay to fall apart sometimes." "No, it's not. I can't afford to fall apart. If I start, I'm afraid I won't be able to stop." Ryan set his phone down carefully, propping it so the flashlight illuminated the space, then turned to face her fully. "When was the last time you let yourself feel anything without trying to control it?" "I don't know. Before my father died, maybe, before everything got so heavy." "That's 2 years, Natalie. 2 years of holding everything in." "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice. You just chose survival over feeling, and that works for a while, but eventually—" He gestured at the flooded basement, at her tears, at the storm raging outside. "Eventually everything breaks anyway." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You're right. You're completely right, and I hate it. I know. I'm so tired, Ryan. I'm so tired of being strong and capable and in control. I'm tired of pretending I have everything figured out when I barely know what I'm doing. I'm tired of going to bed alone in this big empty house and waking up alone and spending every day alone, even when I'm surrounded by people." The words were pouring out of her now, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. "I miss my father. I miss having someone who believed in me. I miss feeling like I mattered to someone beyond what I could do for them or how much money I could make them. I miss being touched. I miss being seen. I miss feeling like a person instead of just a position." Ryan's heart was hammering in his chest. "Natalie, and the worst part is that I let you in. I let you and Emma into my life, and now I can't imagine going back to how it was before. But that terrifies me, because what if something happens? What if I need you and then you're gone? What if I finally let myself care and then I lose everything all over again? You won't lose me. You can't promise that. No one can promise that. My father died in the middle of a normal Tuesday. Your wife was just driving home from an art show. Life doesn't care about our plans or our promises. It just takes, and we're supposed to what? Just keep opening ourselves up to that kind of pain?" Ryan took a step closer. "Yes? That's insane." "Maybe, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is this: hiding in an empty house, calling it safety when it's really just slow suffocation. Is that really what you want?" "I don't know what I want anymore." "I think you do. I think you're just scared to admit it." They were close enough now that Ryan could see every detail of her face in the phone's glow, the tracks of tears on her cheeks, the exhaustion in her eyes, the desperate hope she was trying so hard to suppress. "What am I scared to admit?" she whispered. "That you don't want to be alone anymore. That you're tired of pretending you're fine when you're breaking. That maybe, just maybe, you want to let someone in for real this time. And if I do? If I let you all the way in and then lose you? Then you'll survive it, just like you survived losing your father, just like I survived losing Sarah. It will hurt like hell, but you'll survive. And in the meantime, you get to actually live instead of just existing." Natalie closed her eyes, more tears sliding down her face. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." "You are." Ryan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb. "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met. You just don't see it." "How am I brave? I'm literally crying in my basement over some water. You called me for help. You admitted you couldn't handle it alone. You're standing here telling me all the things you've been too scared to say out loud. That's brave, Natalie. That's incredibly brave." She opened her eyes and looked at him, and the expression on her face made everything else disappear. The storm, the flooded basement, the years of grief and fear and careful distance, all of it faded until there was just the two of them in the dim light, standing close enough to feel each other breathe. "I care about you," Natalie said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I tried not to. I tried to keep it professional and friendly and safe. But I care about you so much it scares me." Ryan's breath caught. "I care about you too." "What do we do about that?" "I don't know, but I think we need to figure it out together." She nodded slowly, then did something that surprised them both. She closed the remaining distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face against his chest. Ryan froze for half a second, then his arms came around her, holding her close. She was shaking, from cold or emotion or both, and he could feel her tears soaking through his wet shirt. He held her tighter, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." Natalie made a broken sound and held on like he was the only thing keeping her from drowning. All the walls she'd so carefully constructed were gone, leaving her raw and vulnerable and terrifyingly open. But Ryan's arms were steady around her, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself lean on someone else's strength instead of pretending she had her own. They stood like that for a long time, the storm raging outside while something equally powerful settled between them. This was the moment everything changed. They both knew it. There was no going back to careful distance and professional boundaries. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. When Natalie finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "I'm a mess." "You're human." "Same thing." She laughed shakily, then seemed to realize she was still in his arms. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize." Ryan loosened his hold but didn't let go completely. "Do you feel better?" "Actually, yes. Which is annoying because you were right about the whole letting yourself feel things concept." "I'm occasionally right about things." She smiled, and it was genuine. More than occasionally. The light suddenly flickered back to life, making them both blink in the sudden brightness. The basement looked worse in the full light. Water stains on the concrete, damp boxes that would need to be checked, the general chaos of an emergency barely averted. But Natalie didn't seem to care about any of that. She was still looking at Ryan with an expression that made his heart race. "Stay," she said impulsively. "The storm's still bad. You shouldn't walk back in this weather." Ryan hesitated. "Emma's alone." "She's asleep though, right? And you can see your house from here. If anything happened, you'd know." He knew he should say no, knew that staying would complicate things even further. But the thought of walking back out into that storm, of leaving Natalie alone in this big house after everything that had just happened, felt impossible. "Okay," he said, "but just until the worst of the storm passes." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you." They went upstairs and Natalie disappeared to change into dry clothes while Ryan called to check his home voicemail. Nothing from Emma. She was undoubtedly sound asleep, completely unaware of the drama unfolding across the street. Natalie returned in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair damp from a quick shower. She looked younger like this, softer, more like the woman she might have been if grief hadn't hardened her edges. "I made tea," she said, handing him a mug. "And I found some dry clothes that might fit you. My father was about your size." Ryan took the clothes gratefully and changed in the bathroom, trying not to think too hard about wearing a dead man's sweatpants. When he emerged, Natalie was curled up on the couch, her own mug cradled in her hands. He sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "You don't have to sit so far away," she said quietly. "I won't bite." Ryan shifted closer, and Natalie immediately leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. It felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "What happened after Sarah died? In those first months? How did you survive it?" Ryan thought back to that terrible time, the grief so overwhelming he could barely breathe around it. "I didn't, at first. I was just going through the motions, getting Emma up, fed, to daycare, going to work, coming home. Repeat. I felt like I was underwater watching my own life happen from a distance." "What changed?" "Emma. She started having nightmares, started clinging to me constantly, afraid I'd disappear too. Her daycare teacher pulled me aside and said Emma was withdrawing from the other kids. That's when I realized my grief was damaging her, so I forced myself to engage, to be present, to show her that even though we'd lost Sarah, we still had each other. And somewhere in the process of being there for Emma, I found my way back to myself." Natalie was quiet for a long moment. "I don't have an Emma. I don't have someone who needs me to be okay. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need yourself. To be okay for your own sake, not someone else's. That's harder than it sounds. Everything worth doing is hard." She turned to look up at him, her face inches from his. "Is this hard? What's happening between us?" Ryan's pulse quickened. "Terrifying, actually." "Good. I'd hate to be the only one freaking out." "You're definitely not." They looked at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Ryan could see the exact moment Natalie made a decision, could see the fear and hope warring in her eyes before she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft and tentative and tasted like tea and tears. Ryan's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek as he kissed her back. 4 years of loneliness and carefully maintained control dissolved in that single point of contact. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "Was that okay?" Natalie whispered. "More than okay. I haven't kissed anyone since—" "I know. Me neither." She searched his face. "Are we insane for doing this? For caring about each other when we're both still so broken?" "Probably. But maybe broken people are the only ones who really understand each other." Natalie smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "I like you, Ryan Walker. Way more than I should. The feeling is mutual, Natalie Vaughn." She kissed him again, less tentative this time, and Ryan let himself fall into it. Let himself feel all the things he'd been suppressing, the attraction, the affection, the desperate hope that maybe he could have this. That maybe they both could. Outside, the storm began to ease, the thunder moving into the distance. But inside, something else was just beginning, something fragile and precious and terrifying, something that felt dangerously like a second chance. They eventually fell asleep on the couch, tangled together like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Ryan woke first as dawn light filtered through the windows, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling and the weight of Natalie's head on his chest. Then the previous night came rushing back, the storm, the flooded basement, the kiss that had changed everything. He looked down at her sleeping face, peaceful in a way he'd never seen while she was awake, and felt his chest constrict with a complicated mix of emotions. Affection? Yes. Desire? Absolutely. But also terror, because this mattered in a way nothing had mattered since Sarah died. Natalie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked confused, then memory clearly returned because she tensed. "Good morning," Ryan said softly, not moving. "Morning." Her voice was rough with sleep. "Did we really—" "Yeah." She sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. The morning light was less forgiving than the phone's glow had been, and Ryan could see the uncertainty creeping back into her expression. "I should check on Emma," he said, reaching for his phone. It was just past 6. A text from his neighbor, Sarah's mom, read, "Saw your lights were out. Emma okay? Let me know if you need anything." He typed back quickly, "All fine. Power's back on. Thanks for checking." Everything okay? Natalie asked. Yeah, neighbor was just making sure we didn't need anything. He stood, suddenly feeling awkward in her father's borrowed clothes. I should get home before Emma wakes up. She'll panic if I'm not there. Right, of course. Natalie pulled a throw blanket around herself like armor. Ryan, about last night. We don't have to talk about it right now, he said, even though part of him desperately wanted to. You should get some rest. It was a long night. Relief and disappointment flickered across her face in equal measure. Okay, will you still come over later to check the window seal? If you want me to. I do. She stood as well, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. And Ryan, thank you. For coming in the storm, for everything. He wanted to kiss her again, to prove that last night hadn't been a fluke born of exhaustion and emotion. But the morning light made everything feel more complicated, so he just nodded and headed for the door. The walk back across the street felt surreal. The storm had left debris scattered across yards, broken branches, scattered leaves, someone's trash can lid in the middle of the road. Ryan's own yard had weathered it fine, and when he slipped inside, the house was quiet and still. He showered quickly, scrubbing away the basement grime and the scent of Natalie's house that clung to his skin. When he emerged, Emma was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her stuffed rabbit. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice small. "Ms. Natalie's basement flooded during the storm. I went to help." "All night?" "The storm was really bad, sweetheart. It wasn't safe to come home until it passed." Emma studied him with those too perceptive eyes. "Did you sleep there?" Ryan felt heat creep up his neck. "On the couch, yes." "Were you scared?" "A little. Storms like that are serious." Emma nodded solemnly, then said, "Is Ms. Natalie okay?" "She's fine. Just tired." "Are you going to see her today?" "Probably. I need to fix the window that was leaking." "Can I come?" Ryan hesitated. Everything felt different now, and he wasn't sure how to navigate this new territory with Emma watching, but he also couldn't think of a good reason to say no without raising more questions. "Sure." After breakfast. They made pancakes together, Emma chattering about the storm and how loud the thunder had been. Ryan tried to focus on her words, but his mind kept drifting back across the street, to Natalie's tears, to her confession, to the way she'd kissed him like he was air and she'd been drowning. What the hell was he doing? He was a single father with a 6-year-old daughter and a modest landscaping business. Natalie was a millionaire CEO with a company to run and investors to appease. They lived in different worlds, even if their houses were only separated by a street. But then he remembered the way she'd looked on the swing set, laughing like a child. The dirt under her fingernails from working in the garden. The vulnerability in her eyes when she'd admitted she was tired of being alone. Maybe their worlds weren't as different as they seemed. After breakfast, Ryan gathered his tools while Emma put on her garden clothes, a designation she'd created for the old t-shirts and jeans she wore when helping with the flowers. They crossed the street together, and Emma knocked on Natalie's door with her usual enthusiasm. Natalie answered, looking almost as tired as Ryan felt. She'd showered and changed into fresh clothes, but there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Good morning," she said, her smile warm but cautious. "Come in." Emma immediately ran to the back door to check on the garden, leaving the adults alone in the entryway. "How are you?" Ryan asked quietly. "Honestly, I don't know. Last night was—" She trailed off, searching for words. "A lot?" "That's putting it mildly." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture Ryan had come to recognize as self-protection. "I meant everything I said. I just don't know what to do about it now that it's morning and everything feels real again. We don't have to figure it all out today. Don't we? Ryan, I kissed you. She glanced toward the backyard where Emma was visible through the window. This affects more than just us. I know. Emma deserves stability. She deserves someone who has their life together, not someone who falls apart over a flooded basement. You didn't fall apart. You had a normal human reaction to an overwhelming situation. It wasn't normal for me. I don't cry. I don't panic. She stopped, frustration evident in every line of her body. I don't let people see me like that. Maybe that's the problem, Ryan said gently. Maybe you need to let people see you. And what happens when they see me and decide I'm too much work? Too broken? Too... Natalie. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I saw you last night, all of you. The fear, the grief, the loneliness. And I'm still here. She looked up at him, and the hope in her eyes was almost painful. For how long? The question hung between them, impossible to answer with certainty. Ryan thought about Sarah, about the randomness of loss, about how there were no guarantees in life, no matter how badly you wanted them. I don't know, he said honestly. Nobody knows, but I'm here now, that's all I can promise. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is. They stood there, caught between what they wanted and what they feared, until Emma's voice called from the backyard. Dad, the tulips have flowers. The moment broke and Natalie laughed softly. She's right. They bloomed this morning. I saw them when I got up. They went outside together, and Emma was indeed standing in the garden bed, practically vibrating with excitement. Small purple and yellow tulips had opened overnight, their petals bright against the dark soil. We did it! Emma exclaimed. We made them grow! You sure did, Natalie said, and the genuine delight in her voice made Ryan's chest ache. They spent the morning working on repairs. Ryan fixed the windowsill while Natalie and Emma worked in the garden, planting new flowers they'd picked up from the nursery. The domestic ease of it all felt both natural and terrifying. This was what his life could be, not just him and Emma against the world, but the three of them building something together. But what if it all fell apart? Around lunchtime, Ryan was replacing a damaged board on the back porch when the knife slipped. The blade caught his wrist, slicing through skin before he even registered what had happened. Damn it, he hissed, dropping the knife and pressing his other hand over the wound. Blood immediately welled between his fingers, more than he'd expected. Ryan? Natalie's voice came from the doorway. What happened? Just cut myself, it's fine. But when he lifted his hand to check the damage, blood ran down his arm in a steady stream. The cut was deeper than he'd thought. Oh my God! Natalie's voice changed, going high and thin. That's a lot of blood. It looks worse than it is, Ryan said, trying to stay calm. Can you grab me a towel? But Natalie didn't move. She stood frozen in the doorway, her face white as paper, staring at his bleeding wrist like it was a snake about to strike. Natalie? He took a step toward her. I can't. The words came out strangled. I can't look at it. I can't. She turned and ran back into the house. Ryan stood there, confused and bleeding, until Emma appeared with a kitchen towel. Ms. Natalie is crying in the bathroom, she reported, handing him the towel. Why is she crying? I don't know, sweetheart. Ryan wrapped the towel around his wrist, applying pressure. The bleeding was already slowing. Can you stay here while I go check on her? Emma nodded seriously, and Ryan went inside, following the sound of ragged breathing to the powder room. The door was closed. Natalie? He knocked gently. Can you let me in? No, I'm fine. Just give me a minute. You're not fine. Talk to me. Silence, then the sound of the lock clicking. Ryan opened the door to find Natalie sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm so sorry. I just saw all that blood and I can't. Ryan knelt beside her, careful to keep his wrapped wrist out of sight. What's going on? What happened? My father. The words came out broken. He cut himself in the workshop, just a stupid accident with a saw. But he was on blood thinners and it wouldn't stop bleeding. My mother found him and she was screaming and there was so much blood everywhere and... She stopped, choking on a sob. That was 6 months before the heart attack. I keep thinking maybe if he'd been more careful, if we'd made him see a doctor more often, if we'd paid more attention. Natalie, Ryan shifted so he could see her face. Your father's heart attack wasn't your fault, and it wasn't caused by a cut he got months earlier. I know that logically, but when I saw you bleeding, all I could see was him. All I could think about was losing someone else She stopped abruptly, her eyes going wide. The unfinished sentence hung in the air between them. Someone else I love. She'd almost said it. Ryan could see the realization hit her, could see panic flood her features. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she whispered. I let you in, and now I can't bear the thought of losing you. Do you understand how terrifying that is? I've known you for less than 2 months and you're already so tangled up in my life that seeing you bleed makes me fall apart. Ryan set down his wrapped wrist carefully and took her hand. I'm okay. It's just a shallow cut. I'm fine. This time. But what about next time? What about when it's not just a shallow cut? What about when it's a car accident or a heart attack or any of the 1,000 random ways people get taken away? Her voice was rising, panic taking over. I can't do this, Ryan. I can't let myself need you because I won't survive losing you too. So, what's your plan? Push me away? Go back to living alone in this empty house? Yes. She pulled her hand from his. That's exactly my plan, because loneliness hurts, but at least it's predictable. At least I have control over it. That's not living, Natalie. That's just existing. Maybe existing is safer. It's not. You're dying anyway, just slower. At least if you let yourself live, you get something beautiful in between the fear. She shook her head, fresh tears falling. You don't understand. Everyone I've ever loved has left me. My father, my grandmother, even my sister in a way. They all left and I'm still here, still alone, still trying to figure out how to breathe around the emptiness. I can't add you to that list. I can't let Emma onto that list. It will break me. Or it will save you. You can't promise that. No, Ryan admitted. I can't. But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere by choice. I can promise that whatever happens, I want to face it with you instead of alone. And I can promise that hiding from life doesn't actually protect you from loss. It just guarantees you'll miss out on all the good stuff in between. Natalie looked at him, her eyes red and swollen, her walls back up and reinforced. I need you to leave. The words hit Ryan like a physical blow. What? I need you to go. Take Emma and go home. I need to think. Natalie, please. Her voice broke. I'm asking you to respect my boundary. I need space to figure this out. Every instinct Ryan had screamed at him to fight, to stay, to break through her fear with sheer persistence. But he also understood the importance of respecting someone's stated needs, even when it hurt. Okay, he said quietly, standing up. But this conversation isn't over. Maybe it needs to be. He left her sitting on the bathroom floor and collected Emma from the backyard. His daughter, perceptive as always, didn't ask questions when he said they needed to go home. She just gathered her things and waved goodbye to the garden. As they crossed the street, Emma slipped her hand into his. Is Ms. Natalie mad at us? She asked. No, sweetheart. She's just scared. Of what? Of caring about people and losing them. Emma considered this. That's silly. If you never care about anyone, you're already alone. That's worse than maybe losing someone someday. Ryan stopped walking and looked down at his daughter, amazed once again by the wisdom that came out of her 6-year-old mouth. You're absolutely right, he said. I know, so why doesn't Ms. Natalie know it? Because sometimes grown-ups forget things that kids understand easily, like how being scared of being hurt is just another way of being hurt. We should remind her. I'm not sure she wants to be reminded right now. Emma frowned. But you like her, and she likes you, I can tell. Sometimes liking someone isn't enough, Em. That's dumb. Ryan couldn't help but smile. Yeah, it kind of is. They went home, and Ryan bandaged his wrist properly, while Emma made them peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. The cut was shallow, barely needing more than a Band-Aid. The whole incident had been minor, forgettable. Except it had triggered something in Natalie that went far deeper than a surface wound. Ryan spent the afternoon trying to distract himself with work, catching up on emails and scheduling jobs for the following week. But his mind kept drifting across the street, wondering what Natalie was doing, whether she was okay, if she was already building her walls back up. That evening, after Emma was asleep, he stood at his kitchen window and looked at Natalie's house. The lights were on in her office. He could see her silhouette moving behind the windows, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His phone buzzed with a text. From Natalie. I'm sorry for earlier, for falling apart and then pushing you away. He typed back, You don't have to apologize for being human. I don't know how to do this, how to want something and be terrified of it at the same time. Nobody does. We just have to be brave enough to try. There was a long pause before her next message came through. What if I'm not brave enough? Ryan stared at the question, his heart aching for her. He could give her platitudes, could tell her she was braver than she thought, could promise everything would be fine. But he'd learned that Natalie responded better to honesty than reassurance. "Then I'll wait until you are," he typed. "But I'm not going to pretend I don't care about you to make you feel safer. That's not fair to either of us. I'm not asking you to pretend." "Then what are you asking?" Another long pause. Then, "I don't know. Space maybe. Time to figure out if I can do this. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now. I mean it now. And I'll mean it tomorrow and the day after that." He watched her silhouette stop pacing. She stood still for a long moment, then moved to the window. Even across the distance, he could feel her looking back at him. "I saw you bleeding, and I felt like I was dying," she texted. "That's how much power you already have over me. That's how tangled up we've become. And that scares you, terrifies me." "It terrifies me too," Ryan admitted. "I spent 4 years keeping everyone at arm's length, protecting myself and Emma from getting hurt again. You're the first person who made me want to risk it." "Why me?" "Because you're real. Because you don't pretend to have it all together. Because when you laugh, it sounds like someone who forgot they were allowed to be happy. Because you see me as a person instead of just a single dad doing his best." He watched her silhouette sink down, probably sitting on the floor by the window like Emma sometimes did when she was thinking hard about something. "I'm broken, Ryan. Really broken. Not in a romantic, fixable way. In a messy, complicated, might-never-be-whole-again way. So am I. Maybe we can be broken together. That's not how healing works." "How do you know? Have you tried it?" No response for several minutes. Ryan stayed at the window, watching her house, giving her space to process. Finally, "No, I haven't tried it. I've been too busy pretending I wasn't broken at all." "How's that working out?" "Terrible." "Obviously." Ryan smiled despite the heaviness of the conversation. "So maybe try something different." "Like what?" "Like trusting that I know what I'm getting into, like believing that I care about you not in spite of your broken pieces, but because of them. Like accepting that love doesn't require you to be perfect, just present." He saw her stand up, her silhouette moving away from the window. For a moment he thought she was done talking, that he'd pushed too hard. Then his doorbell rang. Ryan's heart jumped as he moved through the quiet house and opened the front door. Natalie stood on his porch in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, her eyes red from crying but clear with purpose. "I'm terrified," she said without preamble. "I'm terrified of needing you. I'm terrified of losing you. I'm terrified that I'm not enough or that I'm too much or that I'll screw this up in some catastrophic way." "Okay," Ryan said quietly, "but I'm more terrified of going back to how I was before you, of spending the rest of my life alone in that house, wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try." Ryan's chest tightened. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try, even though I'm scared, even though I might fall apart again, even though there are no guarantees and I might get hurt." She took a shaky breath. "I'm saying I care about you too much to let fear win this time." Ryan stepped out onto the porch, closing the door quietly behind him so they wouldn't wake Emma. "You're sure?" "No, I'm absolutely not sure, but I'm here anyway." He reached for her hand and she let him take it, her fingers trembling slightly in his. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I don't know how to do this. I'm going to panic. I'm going to push you away when things feel too intense. I'm going to have moments where I convince myself this is a terrible idea. I know. And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with whatever we need to work through. As long as you promise to keep showing up, to keep trying, even when it's hard." I can't promise I won't run." "Can you promise you'll come back?" She looked at him, and slowly, deliberately, she nodded. "Yes, I can promise that." Ryan pulled her into his arms, and she melted against him, her face pressed into his chest. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other on his front porch while the neighborhood slept around them. "This is insane," Natalie mumbled against his shirt. "We barely know each other." "We know enough. Do we? What if—" "Natalie." He pulled back just enough to see her face. "Stop catastrophizing. We're just two people who care about each other. That's all this has to be right now. Just two people. Just two broken people who are tired of being alone." She smiled, small but real. When you put it that way, it sounds almost simple. Maybe it is. Nothing in my life has ever been simple. Then maybe it's time to try something new. She stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of terrified hope. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm going to mess this up," she whispered. "Probably. I'll mess it up too. What do we do when that happens? We talk about it. We forgive each other. We keep trying. That's it? That's the whole plan?" "That's the whole plan," she laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "Okay, I can try that." They stood together on the porch until the night air grew cold and Natalie started shivering. Ryan walked her back across the street, and at her door she turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up on me. Thank you for not staying hidden." She kissed him once more, then went inside. Ryan walked back to his house feeling lighter than he had in years, despite knowing how complicated everything was about to become. Because complicated with Natalie was better than simple without her. And maybe that was all the certainty either of them needed. The next few weeks unfolded with a tentative sweetness that neither Ryan nor Natalie had expected. They didn't rush into anything dramatic or make grand declarations. Instead, they simply began to exist in each other's lives with intention rather than pretense. Ryan still came over to work on repairs, but now Natalie would sit with him and talk while he worked, or they'd take breaks together on the back porch, sharing coffee and conversation that ranged from trivial to profound. Emma continued to treat Natalie's house as an extension of their own, and Natalie stopped trying to maintain the artificial boundary between neighbor and something more. The something more remained undefined, which suited them both. They were learning each other slowly, carefully, like people who'd been burned before and knew the value of patience. Natalie kept her promise about showing up even when she was scared. There were moments when Ryan could see the panic creep into her eyes, when something would trigger that old fear of loss and she'd start to withdraw. But each time she'd catch herself, take a breath, and stay present instead of running. Ryan did the same. There were nights when the guilt would hit him, guilt about moving on from Sarah, about bringing someone new into Emma's life, about risking his daughter's heart along with his own. But he'd remember what Emma had said about being alone, and he'd push through the fear to the hope on the other side. Emma, for her part, seemed thrilled with the development. She'd started calling Natalie's house our other house, and had designated a corner of Natalie's office as her drawing space. Natalie had bought her a proper art desk, claiming it was gathering dust in storage when Ryan knew for a fact she'd ordered it specially. It was domestic and sweet and terrifying in its normalcy. Then Natalie's mother called. Ryan was replacing a light fixture in Natalie's dining room when he heard her phone ring. She glanced at the screen, and her entire body went rigid. "I need to take this," she said, her voice tight. She stepped into her office and closed the door. Ryan continued working, but he could hear the muffled sound of conversation through the wall. Natalie's voice rose and fell, sharp and defensive, then quiet and strained. The call lasted nearly 40 minutes. When she finally emerged, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Everything okay?" Ryan asked, climbing down from the ladder. "My mother is coming to visit." The words came out flat, emotionless. "She'll be here Friday, staying through the weekend." "That's good, right? You haven't seen her in a while?" "It's complicated." Natalie sank into one of the dining room chairs. "My mother has very specific ideas about how I should live my life, and I guarantee she's coming to enforce them." "What kind of ideas?" "The kind where I sell this house, move closer to her in California, scale back the company, and generally stop making what she calls emotional decisions based on grief." Natalie's laugh was bitter. "She thinks everything I've done since my father died has been a mistake. The house, the location, the way I run the business, all of it." "And what do you think?" "I think she's partially right. I did buy this house as an escape. I did throw myself into work to avoid dealing with loss. But that doesn't mean it was all a mistake. And it definitely doesn't mean the solution is to sell everything and start over somewhere else." Ryan pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "So tell her that." "You don't know my mother. She doesn't really do conversations. She does pronouncements, and I usually just go along with them because it's easier than fighting." "Maybe it's time to stop going along." Natalie looked at him, fear and determination warring in her expression. "She's going to hate that I'm involved with you." The casual way she said, "involved with you," made Ryan's heart skip, even as the content of the statement sank in. Why would she hate that? Because you're not what she would have chosen for me. You're not a tech executive or an investor or someone who can advance my career. You're a landscaper with a 6-year-old daughter and a modest income. She said it without judgment, just stating what she knew her mother would think. She's going to see you as a distraction at best and a liability at worst. And how do you see me? Natalie's expression softened. I see you as the first person in years who's made me want to actually live my life instead of just survive it. But my mother won't care about that. Then don't tell her about me. She's staying here, Ryan, for 3 days. She's going to notice that I have a man's toolbox in my kitchen and that the neighbor's kid has a desk in my office. She's going to ask questions, and I'm a terrible liar. Ryan thought about it. So we just act normal. I'm the handyman who's been helping with repairs. Emma is the neighbor's kid who likes to play in your garden. It's all true. You're willing to pretend we're not together to make this easier? I'm willing to do whatever you need to get through the weekend. After that, you can decide what you want to tell her and when. Relief flooded Natalie's face, quickly followed by guilt. That's not fair to you. Hiding what we are because I'm too much of a coward to stand up to my mother. You're not a coward. You're just picking your battles. There's a difference. She reached across the table and took his hand. I don't deserve you. Pretty sure it's the other way around. They sat in comfortable silence until Emma burst through the back door, covered in dirt and holding a handful of wildflowers she'd picked from the garden. For you, she announced, presenting them to Natalie with a flourish. Natalie accepted them like they were made of gold. They're beautiful, thank you, Emma. I picked the yellow ones because they match your kitchen. They're perfect. Natalie stood and found a vase, arranging the slightly crushed flowers with more care than they probably deserved. I'll put them right here where I can see them while I work. Emma beamed, then noticed Ryan's expression. Why do you look sad? Not sad, sweetheart, just thinking. About what? About how sometimes grown-up stuff is complicated. Emma considered this, then shrugged. Grown-ups make everything complicated. You should try being a kid. It's easier. Both adults laughed and the tension broke. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden, Emma directing a project to build a fairy house out of sticks and stones, while Ryan and Natalie worked on clearing a new flower bed. It was peaceful and perfect, and Natalie found herself dreading Friday with an intensity that surprised her. When the day arrived, Natalie was a bundle of nerves. She'd cleaned the house obsessively, hidden any evidence of Ryan's regular presence, and coached herself on staying calm no matter what her mother said. Ryan had promised to keep his distance for the weekend, giving Natalie space to deal with her family. Emma had been disappointed when he explained they wouldn't be visiting Miss Natalie for a few days, but she'd accepted it with the resilience of childhood. Natalie's mother arrived in a hired car at exactly 3 o'clock, punctual as always. Catherine Vaughn was 62, impeccably dressed, and radiated the kind of authority that came from decades of getting exactly what she wanted. Natalie, she air-kissed her daughter's cheeks. You look thin. Are you eating? Hello, Mother. Yes, I'm eating. Come in. Catherine swept into the house with the critical eye of someone looking for flaws to correct. Still so stark, I thought you'd have softened this place up by now, added some warmth. I like it this way. Catherine set down her designer handbag and turned to face her daughter fully. We need to talk. About the house. About the company. About your future. Can you at least settle in first? Have some tea? I'm not here for pleasantries, Natalie. I'm here because I'm worried about you. You've been hiding out here for 2 years and it's time to face reality. Natalie felt her defenses rising. I'm not hiding. I'm living my life, Yves. Are you because, from where I stand, you've isolated yourself in a too-big house in a nothing neighborhood, running a company that's expanding too fast and refusing to deal with the grief that's driving all of it? That's not fair. It's completely fair. Your father died, and instead of processing that loss, you ran away and buried yourself in work. I've watched you do it, and I've tried to give you time, but enough is enough. You need to sell this house, move somewhere with actual community, and restructure the company so it's manageable. Stop punishing yourself by living like a hermit. The words hit like physical blows. partially because some of them were true. Natalie had been running, she had been hiding, but she'd also been slowly, painfully learning to live again. "I'm working on it," she said quietly. "I have a therapist. I'm making changes." "What kind of changes?" "Personal ones. I'm trying to be more present, more connected. You've been what?" Natalie almost told her. Almost said that she'd met someone, that she was learning to let people in, that the house didn't feel empty anymore. But the judgment in her mother's eyes stopped her. "I've been focusing on what makes me happy instead of what I think I should do," she said instead. Catherine's expression hardened. "Happiness is a luxury you can afford after you've secured your future. Right now, you need to be practical." The conversation continued in the same vein through dinner, Catherine presenting her case for why Natalie should sell the house and relocate while Natalie defended her choices with increasing frustration. By the time they went to bed, both women were exhausted and no closer to understanding each other. The next morning, Natalie woke to find her mother already up and making coffee in the kitchen. She was staring out the window at the backyard, her expression thoughtful. "You've been gardening," Catherine said without turning around. "A little, with help from the neighbor." "The one with the child? I saw the swing set being used from my window yesterday evening." Natalie's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten that Emma sometimes played in the yard even when she wasn't there. "Yes, Emma. She's 6. She loves flowers." "And the father?" "Ryan. He's been helping with repairs around the house." Catherine turned to face her daughter, and Natalie saw immediately that her mother knew. Somehow, she just knew. "You're involved with the handyman," Catherine said flatly. There was no point in lying. "Yes." "How involved?" "That's my business." "It's my business when it affects your judgment. Natalie, you can't be serious about this man. He's completely inappropriate for someone in your position." "My position? You mean as a woman who's been lonely for 2 years? I mean as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. You need someone who understands that world, someone who can be an asset to your career, not a distraction from it." Natalie felt anger rising, hot and sharp. "Ryan isn't a distraction. He's the first person in years who's seen me as something other than my job title or my bank account. He's kind and patient and real, and he makes me want to be better. He makes you want to play house and pretend you're someone you're not. No. He makes me remember who I was before grief turned me into someone I don't recognize." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Sweetheart, I know you're lonely. I know losing your father was devastating, but getting involved with an inappropriate man isn't the answer. You're vulnerable right now, and he's taking advantage of that." "He's not taking advantage of anything. If anything, I pursued him." "Then you're using him as a coping mechanism. Either way, it's not healthy." Natalie's hands were shaking. "You don't get to decide what's healthy for me. You don't get to tell me who I can care about or how I should live my life. I'm your mother. It's my job to protect you from making mistakes. I'm 37 years old. I don't need protection. I need support. And I'm trying to support you by giving you perspective you're too close to see." They stared at each other across the kitchen, years of unspoken tension crystallizing into this single moment. "I'm not selling the house," Natalie said quietly. "I'm not moving to California. And I'm not ending things with Ryan to make you comfortable." Catherine's face went cold. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." "You sound just like your father, stubborn and impractical." "Good, because he was also brave and authentic and willing to fight for what mattered to him. And look where that got him, dead at 63 from stress and overwork." The words hung in the air like poison. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Get out," she said quietly. "Natalie, get out of my house, pack your things, and leave." "You don't mean that." "I absolutely mean it. I asked you here hoping we could connect, hoping you'd see that I'm actually doing better. But all you want is to control me, to make me live the life you think I should have, instead of the one I'm building. So leave." Catherine's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally hurt. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when this all falls apart and you're left alone again." She left the kitchen, and 15 minutes later, Natalie heard the front door close. Through the window, she watched her mother's hired car pull away, and only then did she let herself cry. She cried for the relationship with her mother that had never been what she needed. She cried for her father, who would have understood even if he didn't agree. She cried for all the years she'd spent trying to live up to impossible standards instead of defining her own. And then, when the tears finally stopped, she pulled out her phone and texted Ryan. "Can you come over? I need you." The response came within seconds. "On my way." 5 minutes later, Ryan appeared at her door. He took one look at her tear-stained face and pulled her into his arms without a word. "She's gone," Natalie said into his chest. "I told her to leave." "What happened?" "She wants me to sell the house, move to California, restructure my entire life. And when I said no, when I told her about you, she said I was making a mistake, that you were inappropriate, and I was using you as a coping mechanism." Ryan's arms tightened around her. "What did you say?" "I told her it was my life and my choice, and then I kicked her out." Natalie pulled back to look at him. "I've never done that before. Never stood up to her like that." "How does it feel?" "Terrifying, exhilarating, like I might throw up." Ryan laughed softly. "That sounds about right." "She's going to tell my sister, tell the whole family that I've lost my mind, that I'm throwing my life away for some guy I barely know." "Are you? Throwing your life away?" Natalie looked up at him, and something in her chest settled. "No, I'm finally building one." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Natalie felt steadier than she had all weekend. "Where's Emma?" she asked. "With Sarah's mom. She's been asking about you constantly. Wants to know when we can come back over." "Now. Bring her over now. I want to see her." Ryan texted his neighbor, and 20 minutes later, Emma came bounding through the door. "Miss Natalie!" She launched herself at Natalie with the full force of 6-year-old enthusiasm. "I missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart. Can we work in the garden? The roses need watering." "Absolutely." They spent the afternoon outside, the three of them working together to tend the garden that had become a shared project. Emma chattered constantly, filling the silence with observations and questions and elaborate plans for what they should plant next. Natalie watched Ryan help Emma water the flowers, his patience endless as he explained how to check if the soil needed more water. She watched Emma's face light up when she discovered a butterfly, and Ryan's gentle smile as he identified it for her. This was what her mother couldn't see. This wasn't about Ryan's job or his income, or whether he could advance Natalie's career. This was about connection and presence and choosing to build something real instead of something impressive. As evening approached, Emma started to yawn, her energy finally depleted. Ryan scooped her up, and she rested her head on his shoulder with the complete trust of a child who'd never doubted her father's love. "We should go," Ryan said. "Get her fed and to bed." "Oh, stay for dinner," Natalie said impulsively. "Please, I don't want to be alone tonight." Ryan looked at her carefully. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." They ordered pizza and ate on the back porch, Emma wedged between them on the outdoor couch. She fell asleep halfway through her second slice, sprawled across both adults with her characteristic lack of boundaries. "She's completely passed out," Ryan whispered, looking down at his daughter with affection. "She worked hard today." Natalie stroked Emma's hair gently. "She's a good kid." "The best." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the garden. The tulips they'd planted were in full bloom now, bright spots of color against the green. The roses were thriving, and the vegetable patch Emma had insisted they start was producing tiny tomatoes. "I meant what I told my mother," Natalie said quietly, "about not selling the house, about choosing my own life." "I know you did. But I need to make some other changes too. With the company. I've been thinking about what you said about building something I actually want instead of something I think I should have. What does that look like?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Maybe bring in a managing partner to handle the expansion stuff I hate. Maybe shift focus back to the design work I actually enjoy. Maybe even take a vacation." She smiled. "Remember those?" "Vaguely. We should take one, the three of us." Ryan looked at her, surprise evident in his expression. "Really? Really? Nothing fancy? Maybe just a weekend at the coast?" "Emma would love the beach." "She would." He shifted carefully, trying not to wake his daughter. "Are you sure about this? About us?" Because once we start doing family vacations, this becomes real in a way that's hard to undo. Natalie took a breath, feeling the familiar flutter of fear in her chest. But underneath it was something stronger, certainty. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not scared. I am. But I'm more scared of losing this than I am of fighting for it. So yes, I'm sure. Okay then. Ryan leaned over and kissed her, awkward with Emma between them, but no less meaningful. Let's do this. They carried Emma home together, Natalie walking with them across the street. She waited while Ryan tucked his daughter into bed, then walked him back to the door. Thank you for coming over today, she said, for being here when I needed you. Always. I mean it. You could have stayed away, could have let me deal with my mother alone. But you showed up. That's what people who care about each other do, Natalie smiled. I'm still learning that. We both are. She kissed him goodnight and walked back to her house, which no longer felt empty or cold or like a place she was hiding. It felt like home. The next few weeks brought more changes. Natalie hired a managing partner to handle the operational side of the company, freeing her to focus on design and creative direction. She started leaving the office at reasonable hours. She had lunch with her therapist and admitted that she was in a relationship, then spent 45 minutes processing all the fears that came with that admission. She also called her sister. The conversation was difficult and emotional, full of tears and old wounds and hard truths. But by the end, they had agreed to try, to actually talk instead of just exchanging pleasantries, to work on rebuilding what grief had fractured. Ryan integrated Natalie into his life with the same quiet steadiness he brought to everything. She started joining them for weekly dinners, started attending Emma's school events, started being introduced as Dad's girlfriend, which made her panic the first time until she saw how naturally Emma accepted it. The neighborhood noticed, of course. Sarah's mom, who lived 3 doors down, approached Ryan one afternoon with a knowing smile. She's good for you, she said simply. Sarah would approve. The words meant more than Ryan could express. 3 months after the confrontation with her mother, Natalie stood in her backyard with Ryan and Emma, surveying their work. The garden had been completely transformed. Where there had been overgrown bushes and neglect, there were now neat beds bursting with flowers, a thriving vegetable patch, and even a small herb garden by the back door. We did good, Emma announced, hands on her hips in a gesture unconsciously mimicking Natalie. We did very good, Natalie agreed. Can we plant more next spring? Definitely. Emma ran off to check on the fairy house she'd built, leaving the adults alone. I got a call from my mother yesterday, Natalie said, leaning against Ryan. Yeah? She wants to come visit again, says she'd like to meet you properly this time. How do you feel about that? Nervous, but ready. I told her she could come, but only if she was prepared to actually listen instead of just lecture. What did she say? She said she'd try. Natalie smiled. It's not much, but it's something. Ryan kissed the top of her head. It's progress. They stood together, watching Emma play, and Natalie felt something settle deep in her chest. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of fear or pain or complication, but the presence of something worth fighting for. Hey, Ryan. Yeah? I love you. She felt him still, then pull her closer. Say that again. I love you. I'm terrified, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm definitely going to mess this up sometimes. But I love you. I love you too. He turned her to face him, his eyes serious. Both of us. Emma and me. We love you. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, but for once, they were happy tears. I love you both too. Emma came running back, completely oblivious to the moment she'd interrupted. Can we make dinner together? I want to help. Absolutely, Natalie said. What should we make? Spaghetti! With meatballs! They went inside together, the 3 of them, moving around Natalie's kitchen with the easy familiarity of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Emma stood on a stool and helped Natalie measure ingredients while Ryan handled the stovetop. And somewhere in the chaos of cooking and laughter and Emma's endless questions, Natalie realized something profound. This house wasn't empty anymore. It was full of life and noise and the beautiful mess of people who cared about each other. The silence that had once felt safe now seemed unbearable. She'd trade 1,000 quiet evenings for one chaotic dinner with Ryan and Emma. After they ate and Emma was in bed, in the guest room that had slowly become her room, filled with books and toys and drawings, Ryan and Natalie sat on the back porch. "She basically lives here now," Natalie said, not complaining, just observing. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay, it's perfect." Ryan took her hand. "I've been thinking about the future, about what we're building. And I want to make sure we're on the same page, that we want the same things." Natalie's heart raced, but with excitement rather than fear. "What do you want?" "I want this, us, a life together, maybe eventually something more permanent." "Like marriage?" "Eventually, yeah, if you want that too." Natalie thought about it, about the life she'd built alone and the life they were building together, about the walls she'd torn down and the future she was finally brave enough to want. "I want that too," she said. "Not tomorrow. We should probably date for more than 3 months before we start planning a wedding. But eventually, yes, I want to build a life with you." Ryan pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, planning a future that felt both terrifying and inevitable. 6 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in spring, Natalie's entire family gathered in her backyard for Emma's 7th birthday party. Catherine was there, making an effort to be pleasant even if she still had reservations. Natalie's sister had flown in from Barcelona with her girlfriend, and the house was full of children from Emma's class and their parents. It was chaos and noise and everything Natalie had avoided for years. It was perfect. Ryan found her in the kitchen, refilling the lemonade pitcher. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm great." And she meant it. A year ago, the thought of this many people in my house would have sent me into a panic attack. Now I'm disappointed we don't do it more often. We can change that. "I know." She set down the pitcher and wrapped her arms around him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For knocking on my door 2 years ago and refusing to let me hide anymore. For being patient while I figured out how to be a person again. For loving me even when I was too scared to love you back." "You make it sound like I did you a favor. But Natalie, you saved me too. You reminded me that life doesn't end when you lose someone. That it's okay to want more than just survival. That opening your heart again isn't betraying the people you've lost." They kissed, and Emma's voice rang out from the backyard. "Dad, Miss Natalie, we need to cut the cake." They walked outside hand in hand, and Natalie looked around at the garden they'd built together, at the people filling her yard, at the life she'd constructed from broken pieces. The house across the street was no longer silent. It was full of laughter and light and the beautiful, messy reality of people who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to. It was finally a home. And as Emma blew out her candles, making a wish with her eyes squeezed shut and her whole heart visible on her face, Natalie made her own silent wish for the courage to keep choosing this, to keep showing up even when it was scary, to keep building a life based on love instead of fear. She looked at Ryan, who was watching her with a smile that said he knew exactly what she was thinking. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that her wish had already come true.